Notre Dame came this close to knocking off Ohio State in one of the biggest games of the year last season, and now that they're going to square off in the national championship game, what lessons can the Irish take from that heartbreaking loss? Tim O'Malley and I break it down, plus a whole lot more on today's Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I'm a Notre Dame alum, producer at Fox Sports, and I'm thrilled to have you here on this Thursday, January 16th. And thanks for getting your day started right here by making this your first listen of the day. Before we get rolling, make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or however else you might be tuning in today. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. I don't know about you, but this week feels like it is crawling as we all anxiously await kickoff on Monday, January 20th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern between Notre Dame and Ohio State in the national championship game. It's difficult to think about practically anything else, but to help get you through the wait, I'm going to be joined by a great friend of the program, beat writer Tim O'Malley from Irish Illustrated, to break down this game even more. Tim shares his perspective on where this game ranks in Notre Dame lore. Plus, we break down how the Irish will try to defend Ohio State's wide receivers. Will they run man, or are they going to switch to zone? We have our thoughts. Plus, we take a look at what the coordinators can do differently to exploit the Buckeyes. And then we're going to wrap things up with the best path to victory for the Irish. We have been trying to set this up for a while now, and I'm so glad we were able to do it before the championship because this was a lot of fun, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Let's bring in Tim. All right, Tim O'Malley from Irish Illustrated is back with me here, and I realized right before we started that last season you came on the show just like a couple days after Notre Dame lost to Ohio State, and it wasn't a great time. But now I've got you before the game, so maybe that'll bring us some good juju here. I want to start by getting some historical perspective because yesterday I said that if Notre Dame were to win this game over Ohio State, it would be the biggest win in school history because it's for a championship, it's against the Buckeyes, and it's the first year of a new age in college football with an expanded playoff, and the reaction was predictable. The younger generation agreed with me, and then I had some people who watched, like Eric Parsegian's teams, tell me that I'm an idiot. So what is your perspective on the magnitude of this game?
I did not watch Eric Parsegian's teams, but I agree with you. So the 73 season, 74 Sugar Bowl is the only argument, right? With Tom Clements, yep. That is the argument because they went beating Alabama to win the national title. Obviously, it was a big deal in the South. I mean, this is bigger than Miami. They still had to beat favored number 2 USC later in the year and win the Fiesta Bowl against West Virginia, which, I mean, I think the Fiesta Bowl was the third, if not fourth, biggest game that season. Notre Dame was going to beat West Virginia. USC was difficult, and Miami was, of course, gargantuan at the time. Florida State was devalued by the next week. 93. There's nothing you can say about that. Florida State was devalued by the next week, sadly. That was a huge win at the time. I don't know where else you're going. I don't think you're going anywhere else here. This would be Notre Dame's status in the college football world right now is 35 years removed from a title. In 1973, they were 7 years removed from a title. In 1977, they were 4 years removed from a title. In 1988, they were 11 years removed from a title. I just don't think there's an argument. I think this would be seismic, and you're winning 4. We keep forgetting IU. 4 playoff games in 1 year. It's remarkable.
Right. It's really hard to even be in this point and then to have a chance to do it against another historical power like Ohio State.
Penn State's one of the top 10 wins in program history. I mean, no matter what happens, unless you lose 42-0 here in this next game, it's incredible.
Program history seems like a stretch for me, but honestly, when you think about it, it's got to be up there.
Modern program history, you got to get
certainly.
rid of.
I mean, in my lifetime, like the 2 biggest wins of my lifetime just happened consecutively with Georgia and then Penn State.
Yeah, I'm even saying like Eric Parsegian taking over, we can make that modern program history, even though you're hitting, 60 years now, but let's make that modern program history. That would still be one of the 10 best wins. I mean, It's an elimination game, man. People don't understand that. It's a huge deal, but it's an elimination game.
Yeah, like the Miami game was great in 1988, but there's a world where they win that game, and then, like you said, they could have lost to USC later in the year, and then that game against Miami is looked at a little bit differently. So Notre Dame has a great opportunity going up against Ohio State. We all recognize that it's a tremendous challenge, but these two teams played each other just 15 months ago. So as you evaluate this matchup, like how much do you look back at the game from last season as an indicator of what could take place on Monday?
I mean, I think that's Notre Dame's path to a victory. I think this Ohio State team's offense is humming a lot more than that one ever was, even though they had Marvin Harrison. Egbuka was awesome in that game, man. I couldn't believe he didn't go pro. That was shocking, and now we're about to feel it. I think that's the path. I know they have to play man and mix it up. I know Al Golden, at the time of the 4th and 19, absolutely did not want to lose on a one-on-one jump ball to Marvin Harrison, but I think he might reconsider that nowadays when they're down in that area. It's not apples to apples. That Notre Dame team is a lot healthier than this one. If you had Riley Mills healthy, Jeremiah Love healthy, and that's it. Let's just make the playoff casualties healthy. I would feel a lot better about Notre Dame going to this game than I do now. Obviously, if you made everybody healthy, it would be a much different situation, but that's not regular college football. You make them all healthy.
Yeah, that's kind of my biggest takeaway from last year's game. The way that Notre Dame defended Ohio State's wide receivers, they ran man defense for practically the entire game. And I'm not really sure why, but I don't feel like it was as big of a talking point then as it is now. And I understand that there's so much attention on the freshman phenom, Jeremiah Smith. And he also said before that Oregon game, if you play man against me, you're going to lose. And then sure enough, he lit up the Ducks with 2 touchdowns in the first half there. But they did hold Marvin Harrison, and when I say they, it was mostly Benjamin Morrison, who's not going to be playing in this game, to just 3 catches for 32 yards, and they held their passing attack in check up until that last drive. So I'm expecting more of what we saw from them last year, and I expect them to run a lot of man coverage. But how do you think Notre Dame is going to try to defend Ohio State's passing attack in this game?
Really interesting question is you could probably argue Morrison healthy there and Cam Hart, the 5th-year senior, are a little better than Leonard Moore and Christian Gray, but Xavier Watts and Adon Schuler and Rod Hurd and Jordan Clark as a 4-pack are a lot better than DJ Brown, Ramon Henderson, Thomas Harper. Sorry about that, Irish fans, and whoever else you want to throw out there from that defensive backfield. I mean, they've proven they can do it. As how they're going to defend them, I mean, you have to mix it up. You have to be able to show man and not be in man. You have to be able to show zone and switch late. It can't be a situation where Ohio State's simply running someone in motion to find out if you're in man coverage at this point. There's going to have to be some checks, and I'm sure that's what they're past that part of practice. I'm sure that's what when they get home Saturday. I'm sure that's what Saturday, Sunday, and Monday were for the coaching staff, and at this point is being implemented. If you can't hide it, if you can't confuse Will Howard, I think there's a problem. Every once in a while you watch Will Howard in Ohio State, and you're like, oh, that's the best team in the country. And I think it's because he's comfortable. I think he knows what he's looking at. And of course he has players everywhere. And I think it's because the running game is working too. I heard something today. It was Joel Klatt, I believe, on Colin Cowherd saying Michigan and Nebraska almost tricked Ohio State into running the ball against a 5-man box and still stopped them to set them up behind the chains so they weren't going downfield as much. That's not what Notre Dame does. Maybe Notre Dame does that on 12 snaps over 12 series of football. You got to trust Al Golden. The only time Al Golden didn't win by knockout was last week with Colton Hickey, because he did a fantastic job, but he still won in the end.
He did. I'm glad you brought up Xavier Watts, though, because the conversation about him is so different now than it was then. Yeah. You think about it, like that was
1 pick at that point in his life.
Yeah, and I didn't think he played that great against Ohio State last year. He was just fine, and he didn't really take off and ascend into the Xavier Watts that we see him as now until that USC game. And now he's clearly, an All-American, one of the best safeties in the country. So I think he's probably itching to get back out there and make an impact on this game, because he was pretty much a non-factor in that game last year. And then at least he wasn't the one who dropped the interception. But regards to Al Golden, it's hard for me to imagine that after 15 games in a season, he has any more tricks left up his sleeve. But maybe that's a disservice to him because he's just that good of a defensive coordinator. So if he were to make some significant changes to his scheme or personnel going up against Ohio State here, What do you think that could be? Like, how could he get creative going up against Ohio State?
I mean, I think you have to go back to your base nickel, your base 4-2-5, because as long as they have Carnell Tate on the field as the number 3, they're forcing, they are forcing your hand. You can't just come back. Remember, against Georgia and Penn State, they went a lot of base 4-3, which we hadn't seen all year. You saw Jalen Snead out there with Kaiser and Bowen, and then KVA came on. Osbury, my guy, did not have his best game against Penn State. But in terms of switching it up, unless you would have more of that package where Rod Hurd is in as well, you are really playing with fire. You're taking too much off the field there, though, with Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, because Judkins is now running hard that he wasn't doing early in the year. I don't know what you can do in terms of personnel. I think they have already made the change where they have that dime package now where it's Snead, KVA, Young, and it's not Ruby. Well, and Burnham, excuse me.
Yeah.
Because that gets Howard Cross some time off the field as well. And then you, of course, have the defensive backs out there. Yeah, I don't know how much more you can tweak the personnel, though. I think it's just going to be all the looks you could show and what you can end up trusting in terms of stopping the run. I hate the idea of playing 70 snaps of the game. I hate the idea of 64 of them being solid and 4 of them going the wrong way. And that's, 3 touchdowns out of those 4.
That's basically what happened at Texas.
Yeah.
Their defense really tightened it up. At the beginning, it looked like it could get ugly, but then they tightened things up. And when you look at how Notre Dame played against Ohio State last year, I felt like it was kind of similar. I mean, they held the Buckeyes to 126 rushing yards, and 61 of those came on one play. Like, that's right. Just how they can hurt you.
If you get him down 25 yards downfield, then that's a completely different situation as well. Travion Henderson just ran away.
Tim will be right back here with us in a second to break down what Notre Dame offensive coordinator Mike Denbrock can scheme up to try and exploit Ohio State's elite defense. But before we do, I want to tell you about this amazing new promotion courtesy of our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. And the FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings, and whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs, FanDuel has you covered. There's a ton of great games this weekend in the NFL with the divisional round, so make sure you go on FanDuel.com and look at all the different options they give you. That's FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. It's going to be really interesting to see what Al Golden tries to do. I'm sure that the Notre Dame coaching staff all understand the challenge that is going to be presented by that Ohio State offense, but that defense is just something special, man, at Ohio State. Like, there's been so much talk about the offense, but that defense is honestly what scares me most. So what do you expect from Mike Denbrock and the offense? Because he obviously wasn't a part of the staff for last year's game. I actually thought Jared Parker called a pretty good game, and we could, rehash the last drive, but we're not going to do that today. I don't expect them to get away from their identity, but Ohio State is such a good defense. I feel like they're going to have to break out some new stuff to try and keep the Buckeyes on their toes. Like, what could they do to try to get some yards and make some big plays against this defense?
I like this question much better because I think there are some things they could do. I don't have an answer for you defensively. I have an answer for you offensively. I've been saying this. You've needed it. You're going to need it if things went worse against Georgia, and I think you're needing it for the championship, whether it was Texas or Ohio State. They are the most aggressive fourth down team out there, and they're going to have to be ultra aggressive on fourth down. And by that, I mean, when it is 4th and 1 at the 50, maybe you don't want 1 yard this time. Maybe that is your shot of getting a touchdown when someone's coming up. I think this is the time to take the shot for the chunk, because when you know what happens when you get 4th and 1 and you get 1 yard against Ohio State, you still have 49 more yards to go, and you only get 3 more downs before you have to go for it again. I think Notre Dame has to take a couple shots in obvious run situations. In terms of staying true to themselves, I mean, you have to do that because you can't get behind the chains when you have 108 pressures per Pro Football Focus coming off the edge only. And you either are going to have Tosh Baker, who is not good in pass pro, or Charles Jagasa, who might be, but he was awfully good as a guard last week for half of a game out there for the first time against those two. And then there's still trouble inside. And oh, by the way, the secondary is as good as Notre Dame's. secondary is going to be all over Notre Dame's receivers to the point where I'd like to point out Mitchell Evans, but you think Jim Knowles doesn't remember what Mitchell Evans did to his team last season. So it's going to be tough sledding in terms of down-to-down efficiency. I firmly believe 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1 becomes we're going to get one on you down, as opposed to let's see if we can move the chains and fight to live another day.
Yeah, because everyone is going to expect the Riley Leonard QB power coming their way. I mean,
that'll have to happen at some point. But
yeah, of course. We already talked about the offensive line. Like, it's not a great feeling going into the biggest game of the year and you don't know who's going to start on the offensive line. But that's the reality for Notre Dame now that left tackle Anthony Knapp is out with an ankle sprain and right guard Rocco Spindler is battling with an ankle injury of his own. I don't know if he's going to play. I think he's going to give it a shot just because I think he's a dog and it's the national championship. So he'll try it. But how do you think Notre Dame is going to approach the offensive line here? Like, are they going to start Jagasaw at left tackle and maybe have to move him over to right guard mid-game? That seems like a lot to ask when you're already asking a player who hasn't played all season to go out there and play a full game. So how do you think they're going to handle this when they actually have to go out there and play?
I mean, I still think Pendleton is the better backup option at his position than Baker is at his position. So you could go Spindler and Jagasaw. And if Spindler gets hurt, which you saw how he got hurt, man. I mean, he just all of a sudden his ankle gave out and he got shoved to the ground like a doll. That's not him. You could tell his ankle was braced and he couldn't do anything about it when he was getting weight put on it. It re-injured it. So he's going to try. It'd be so hard to see him making it through this game. It's multiple injuries now in a couple weeks. I don't know if Pendleton fell out of favor more than I would have guessed. I know they want more power than he was providing, but I feel like Tosh Baker on the edge, I thought he did a good job run blocking in that game. I thought, especially think about it. The situation he was put in, he acquitted himself well, other than maybe 1 or 2 pass rushes.
Yeah.
But those 60 snaps in this situation is tough for him on the edge. So the only reason you could talk me out of Jagasaw at left tackle is you're considering, are you weakening 2 positions? Rocco Spindler is not Rocco Spindler, and you don't have Jagasaw playing his best spot.
Yeah, I guess the way I look at it is if you put Pendleton in and Jagasaw at left tackle, like it's easier to hide Pendleton because he's on the interior of the offensive line. Like you put Tosh Baker out there, he's on an island going up against JT Tuimoloau or Jack Sawyer. Like, I don't love that matchup. I don't think that ends well for Notre Dame.
I don't love Jagasaw either. I haven't seen him play tackle enough for that, but it's a different athleticism and foot and ability to pass set. And we have seen Tosh Baker in one-on-one pass sets, and it's his weakness. So otherwise, he would have started this season because they went with Anthony Knapp, a true freshman who was a 3rd-string center at one point in the spring.
The Pendleton thing is so weird, especially in relation to Tosh Baker, because it felt like the staff was doing everything they possibly could to prevent Tosh Baker from getting on the field, and then he was the first guy off the bench once Knapp went down. And meanwhile, Pendleton started the first half of the season, and now it seems like they're trying to do everything they can to prevent him from going to the game.
And he played against IU when Spindler went down. I mean, he's been back in the fray. Joe Rudolph knows more than we do about the offensive line, though. All we know is that we don't love the Ohio State edge rushing against Tosh Baker on the edge. I can go there. Yeah. And Bill Wagner, hey, he's had baptism by fire now. It can't be any worse than Abdul Carter coming at you the entire time.
Their defensive tackles are so good, too. Like, it is just such a tough matchup. If they can't get anything going up against that front, like, it's going to be a long game for this offense. But last year was a bit of a coming out party for Jeremiah Love in this game. Like, he wasn't really a factor. And then all of a sudden, he's out there getting significant carries, getting some chunk gains. So it's not a surprise to anyone now. Everybody knows who Jeremiah Love is, and he's been dealing with this knee injury for about a month and a half. He has a little bit more time to get ready for this one. Like, what are realistic expectations for him in this game?
Yeah, I mean, can he get to 15 touches? You know, can he possibly do that? Because he's a good short yardage guy for you. Jadarian Price is clearly not the short yardage option. They've gone away from that. I really think Price has to have a much more effective north-south game than he did against. Maybe there was too much pressure on him in that Penn State game, knowing he might have had to be the man. But I think it's 28 touches and 16 stuffs for Jadarian Price in the playoffs. That's ridiculous. That's a painful number. Can Love get 15 touches in this game? It relatively his strength. If so, I think they can work around it. But once again, if this was a perfect world, Jeremiah Love would be getting the ball 22 to 23 times in this game, which would be by far his high. But this is when you unleash someone like that, of course. I love the Aeneas Williams development. Tim Priester used the best term. He's a problem solver. He's resourceful is what he's a resourceful player. Like, if you need 11 yards on a screen, he gets you 10 to 11 yards. If you need 5 yards on a run, he gets you 4 to 5 yards. It's just he's a welcome addition, but Jadarian Price is the guy that when he hits that second step, he can run by Ohio State and Georgia and Penn State and everybody. He just has to go north-south first. He has to get those yards. And I talked to Dylan McCullough about it before Georgia, and he mentioned how Price had grown, no longer tapping his feet. I thought he was tapping his feet again against Penn State, and that was an issue.
Yeah, so do you think he was just a little bit indecisive and he was trying to get to the edge every time against Penn State? Because, it wasn't all his fault. Sometimes he was getting the ball and he was already getting tackled, but it did feel like he was big play hunting.
Yes, I feel like he was. He had one against Georgia that was called back. He's just such a better runner when his pads get leveled or he hits that second step going forward. And I know Ohio State doesn't make that easy on you, but you got to stick with him. He's too valuable of a weapon, and Notre Dame doesn't have a lot of big play guys. They're going against a secondary that's going to make it really hard to have big play guys. And as I mentioned, there's no secret weapon at tight end this game.
That's true. And I'm like pissed off at Texas because I think they found something with the running back in the passing game. I mean, Blue had 2 touchdowns in the game and a long of 26. Like, he really broke it open. It was the first time Texas had anything going offensively when they started to throw it to the running back in the pass game. And last week we saw Notre Dame hit Aeneas Williams for that big play to start the second half. But I thought that one pass from Angeli to him was a huge play. It wasn't a first down, but Notre Dame was backed up behind the sticks. It was like 2nd and 14. Yeah. And Aeneas Williams just has this natural pass catching ability. Like, obviously the catch on the sideline was unbelievable over the shoulder. That is a tough play for a receiver to make, let alone a running back. But the way that he caught the pass from Angeli, where he caught it in stride, like he was still looking at the ball, but he already had his movement going upfield.
Right.
Like, it's little things like that shows he just gets it. He has this innate ability to be a pass catcher as well. So I think he's going to have a really big game, which, again, it seems so crazy to be like, if Aeneas Williams doesn't play great, Notre Dame is in trouble here. But how do you think they'll use these running backs? Because we already talked about Love. Price is the big play guy, but they also have Aeneas Williams to catch some passes.
I think it's been trending where Williams will end up with more touches and more snaps than Price. The key is, I kind of hope we're wrong, because we want those 2 36-yard runs by Jadarian Price too. But I'm with you on Aeneas Williams. The first time I saw him was Irish Invasion, and he was worth the wide receivers. And I thought to myself, that is one heck of a slot receiver. He seems kind of small and compact, though. Then I found out he was athlete running back, and I was all in 100% on the recruitment of Aeneas Williams at that point. He was the MVP of the first half for Notre Dame against Penn State, right?
Wasn't a lot to choose from.
No. So he probably was, and he said actually of the third quarter too, until Jeremiah Love's run. He made that's where those 51 yards came on consecutive plays. So whatever Love can handle, Love's still the guy, and you hope and pray Jadarian Price has one of his best games, but Aeneas Williams has taken over on third down for Price, both long and short. So it's a 3-headed monster, and it has to be, because they are going to really concentrate on Riley Leonard and not let him beat them with his legs. I would think that when teams say spy, like Notre Dame fans always say spy, that ruins your defense usually. I don't think it ruins your defense against Notre Dame. I think it ruins your defense if you lose track of Riley Leonard in any way, shape, or form. And you have to just switch it up and have somebody watching Riley Leonard so he doesn't escape all the time.
Yeah, I would be cool with spying if Abdul Carter was on Notre Dame, and then he just, you know what I mean? Like, that's a different level of spy as opposed to just having the middle linebacker just stand there in the middle of the field. But when you can have an edge rusher to do what he did, like, that was unfair at different points.
I once heard someone tell me they heard before the second game against Michigan and Denard Robinson that Carlo Calabrese and Manti were going to spy on Denard Robinson. I was like, oh, that's great. They're going to watch him run the entire time. Look, good spying. That's beautiful.
Yeah, they can watch the back of his jersey as he scampers into the end zone. Tim and I still have plenty more to talk about in the national championship game. And coming up next, we're going to break down how Notre Dame's offensive line can hold their own against Ohio State's D-line. But first, a word from Prizepicks. Prizepicks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings, Prizepicks has changed the game in daily fantasy sports. Whether it's the playoffs or regular season, Prizepicks has made it easier than ever to win big while enjoying all the football action. Now it's playoff time, and there's no better way to get in on the action than with Prizepicks. Here's how it works. You simply pick more or less on at least 2 players. And if your picks hit, you could win up to 1,000 times your cash. Yes, that's right. 1,000 times your money just by making a few simple picks. For me, I'm all about the hot takes this season, and this week on Prizepicks, I'm looking at Lamar Jackson for more than 250 passing yards and Travis Kelce for more than 70 receiving yards. It's fun to predict and easy to play. Plus, with Prizepicks Flex Play, you can still double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit it. And with the app, you get your winnings fast, sometimes in as little as 15 minutes. Ready to run your game this football season? Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 just for playing. Don't wait. Take your game to the next level with Prizepicks. Prizepicks, run your game. This offensive line, despite everything that they have had to deal with this year, they have played against some of the best defensive lines in the entire country. It started in the season opener against Texas A&M, and then most recently they had to go up against Georgia, who I know this is a relatively down Georgia team that is still an unbelievable defense, especially on the line. And Penn State, they got Abdul Carter, and they also have some really good players there. I know that Penn State kind of gave them some fits, but overall, this group has been able to manage against these better defensive fronts. We know that Ohio State has one of the best in the country. So how much faith do you have in the offensive line to at least hold their own against Ohio State?
I think they could, but my issue goes back to the defensive backs. Like, you want to talk about a team that could go ahead and play more man than they want to. Ohio State can elect to have somebody else up there in the running game. Now, I watched Jim Knowles' press conference the other day, and someone mentioned that when teams go with 2 tight ends, he doesn't consider that an actual 12 package. He looks at it and he's like, you're not really trying to beat us with bully ball. Notre Dame can try to beat you with bully ball, in which case Knowles says, that's when I have to get out of my structure. I have to take the nickel off the field. I'm assuming Notre Dame will try that as much as possible with Raridan and Evans. I don't love it because I don't think you can beat Ohio State with bully ball with that defensive line and your injured offensive line. But to hear Knowles say, this is one team that actually could use a 12 package the way it's supposed to be used with 2 big tight ends that are looking to shove us around. He admitted that's when I have to get out of he loves the 4-2-5. He's like, that's when I have to get out of it. You have to adjust.
Yeah, I think Notre Dame is going to try to utilize Eli Raridan more than they ever have in this game because there's going to be a lot of attention put on Mitchell Evans, in part because of what he did last week against Penn State, but also a big reason why is because he had his game of his career against the Buckeyes last season. So they're going to be keying on him. I think Eli Raridan could present some problems for the Buckeyes because I just think he kind of exists under the radar a little bit. But we have been talking for all this time. We haven't really talked much about the quarterbacks. Riley Leonard a little bit, but this matchup is very intriguing to me. It doesn't have quite the same level of star power as other national championships from the past, but the storylines are great. Like, they're both transfers, and there's a world where these quarterbacks could have flipped and gone to the other school. I think they both made the right choice, but who do you think has the edge going into this game?
I mean, when Howard's playing well, he has the edge because of his weapons and the way he can throw the football, and I just feel like Riley Leonard can be contained by a great defense like Ohio State. If you had a regular defense playing Riley Leonard, that's what I think. When he can run away from ends, and unlike Abdul Carter, when he can run away from guys like that, when he can power through people, he's usually a better athlete than the guys he's going against. He's not a better athlete than the guys he's going against in these last 3 games, and I think it shows in his totals. Riley Leonard just needs to play clean, though. There could be no more, unless it's one of those picks that's intercepted from midfield to the 20-yard line. That's not the end of the world, but he needs a clean game. Will Howard, when Will Howard is on, and I've seen 6 Ohio State games on film, and when I see he's on, I'm like, well, that's it. There's no way, because he has too much going on, including the running game, to help him. So I think Ohio State has the advantage of quarterback in this game.
Yeah, I understand. Like, when it's clicking, man, this offense looks unstoppable, but I can't just remove the Nebraska game or the Michigan game. And the Michigan game was so interesting to me because I honestly think that Will Howard was not 100% right in the head because he took a huge hit early on in that game, came back in, was on the sidelines, pumping up the crowd, came back in, and then he sucked. So
then he realized what that Michigan rivalry actually meant when he went back out there.
But I thought it was extremely telling how Chip Kelly called the game when Will Howard was back in there, because it did not look like an offensive coordinator who had any sort of confidence in his quarterback to make some plays. Like the play calling, when you watch that game and then you watch what they did against Oregon, you're like, these are two different teams, but it's the same quarterback. So
oh gosh, that was
what do you think Notre Dame could do to force Chip Kelly and Ryan Day to change their approach? Is it just as simple as getting pressure on him? Because that seems relatively simple.
Well, I think that pressure is number one, but I think pre-snap is obvious is a big part. He has to enter the second quarter thinking to himself, what I am seeing is not what I'm seeing pre-snap. When all of a sudden you can't trust your eyes, and I'm glad you brought that up, because the other reason I pick Howard over Leonard is I don't think Leonard trusts his pocket right now. Against Penn State,
yeah.
I know it was collapsing around him, but at times it wasn't collapsing around him, and he was looking to escape. Probably a called draw, like they call a million draws for Riley Leonard, where they don't know what to do. Even when it seemed like he had a lane, something was collapsing on him. I just don't think he trusts the pocket. You got to make Will Howard not trust his eyes when he sees any hesitation. He becomes an extremely human quarterback. It's not, I'm not giving him Trevor Lawrence plaudits here. I'm just saying when he's on and they have 5 dudes around him that are great at football, at skill positions, it's tough. At least their offensive line is penetrable. It's not like that 2020 game where you watched Alabama and you're like, oh, their line's better than ours too. That's a problem. Yeah. So they have every advantage. They don't have that. I think love to have Riley Mills and a healthy Howard Cross. But I think Notre Dame, they have some dogs on that defensive line. Even if they're backup dogs, they will not quit. So I think that can help.
Yeah, so is that it? Like the advantages for Notre Dame feel pretty few and far between in this matchup. Yeah. So is the offensive line of Ohio State one area where the Irish actually have an advantage that they could look to exploit?
Yeah, I think so. And I think the front seven's part of it. And Viliamuasa, the way he played against Penn State, I can't believe he made those strides in 1 week, because I thought it was cool he played against Georgia, 13 snaps in the dime, and all of a sudden he's out there standing guys up at the goal line. He's all over the place. He is a difference maker. I love Notre Dame's linebackers. Jalen Sneed is now playing well. Jalen Sneed's playing good football. We can say it out loud. He still has busts. I think I heard this from the Notre Dame locker room. On the interception by Kaiser, Sneed was supposed to be there. Kaiser saw Sneed wasn't going with Warren and just took off and picked off the pass, which would have been one of the best stories of all time had it counted, that he saw a guy and he took off. So I think there's still busts, but I love the way Sneed is pressuring. I like the linebackers front seven grasping a little bit. I know Notre Dame does not have a huge advantage up there, but every time you think Notre Dame's going to get overrun, only Penn State did it, right? And then they bowed up and were able to stop them just enough.
Penn State did it, and they looked tired doing it.
Oh, they were definitely tired. We talked about it on our podcast multiple times. Like, there's a giant advantage between Boise State 2 days and Georgia. Massive. It's not only the 2 days, it's Georgia. And the hitting you endured in that Georgia game. Penn State was probably fresh as a daisy when they landed after the Boise State game compared to Notre Dame. And I thought Notre Dame expended so much energy against Georgia to win that game, mental too. This has been a good reset. Not that the extra day means that much, but Notre Dame it would have hurt a lot more if Notre Dame didn't have the extra day. How's that? Compared to getting the 1 day before Ohio State.
No doubt. And I think the fact that they were able to bow up in the second half and figure it out despite how gassed they are gives me some confidence that they can at least keep them in check during this game, because it's a lot to ask of this unit. All right, in a game like this, it feels impossible for any storyline or any matchup to fly under the radar because we spend so much time talking about it from every possible angle. But is there something about this game or this matchup that you think could have a big impact, or is just you find particularly interesting that hasn't been mentioned a whole lot?
I just teased it, and I think it's Viliamuasa's coming out party as a player. I think against
the team that everyone thought he was going to commit to.
I think Viliamuasa is surging right now. He's fresh. He's fresher than everybody else is at this point. As I said, I'm shocked he was able to come back and play, because I know he was not even close against IU. That was a lie whenever it was going on there. But as well, Drake Bowen's playing well. Jack Kaiser is playing great. Kingston Viliamuasa is my X factor in this game. It's something to watch for. He's their 5-star in real. Like, how many 5-stars are on Ohio State at this point against Viliamuasa, basically, who's
quite a few,
borderline 5-star at some places. So that is probably my X factor player to watch. The one that got away, if somebody gets away from Ohio State. I just think he is the one guy that could truly elevate his game. Like, if he takes the jump from what we saw in November to Penn State again, that's like defensive player of the game level from Viliamuasa.
It's crazy that he's even playing because I got to admit, like, I'm sure you can appreciate this as well. Whenever Marcus Freeman says anything about an injury, it's in one ear, out the other.
Yeah,
I don't put any stock.
It was
BK
Freeman too. It's head
I know.
coach.
No. Trust me. BK. Remember what did he call Hamilton's knee? Like something fat or
the fat
pad or something.
Fat pad. He had a pinched fat pad.
Yeah, I think he just made that shit up at the press conference.
I know.
But when Freeman said that KVA had any chance of coming back, and then I was at that USC game, I remember seeing him on the field pregame. He had this giant brace. He's barely moving around the field. I'm like, all right, like there's no way he's coming back this season. Like, look. I love Freeman. This is the same guy who said that like Riley Mills' injury wasn't season ending. And then as it turns out, he has ACL, MCL, and potentially even more damage to that knee. So like, it's just a guessing game. So the fact that KVA is even in this position is great. And all credit to him for getting to this point. But I don't want to ask you for a score prediction just yet. I don't want to steal
I don't have one yet. So that's
okay.
Good.
Just break down the best path to victory for Notre Dame.
All right. Glad you asked that because I think it goes not playing scared like they did at Ohio State, but I do think fewer possessions, the better, because then your ability to play man-to-man is not exposed so many plays, so many passes, which means Notre Dame is going to have some quality drives that aren't touchdowns. That's fine. It's a keep away without the way they were playing keep away when they had Tyler Buckner and no chance of winning that game. They tried to back into that win in 2022. And to Freeman's credit, they have not tried to do that very often since. So you can't back into this win. But I do think that when you hit that 12th, 13th possession, it's like, oh, we needed a 5-possession half mixed in there. I think that's huge. Jeremiah Love, the best he can possibly give. The emotional lift, that's the question I asked Freeman. The emotional lift that Jeremiah Love gave them, I think he's going to have to be able to do that again. And I'm going to stick with Jadarian Price because I can't put Love's health saying Love should break 1 for 50. Jadarian Price has to show up and play Jadarian Price football. It's been disappointing in the playoff so far. I think he's better than that. Actually, I thought against Georgia, he ran north-south. They just contained him because they're Georgia's defensive front seven. That's fair too. I was disappointed in the last game and even Indiana. I think he's a key to it because he's the best player on the field who has an over-under of 23 yards in Vegas right now. And that sounds like an easy one, doesn't it?
I mean, he only had 13 last week.
Exactly. I know, but he's too good for that. They need more of that because you can't go out and say Bo Collins and Jaden Greathouse are going to do all this. It's Jadarian Price is my X factor in that game. I think we need to see a really good game from him. And then for Al Golden, he's in charge, man. I don't know. I love Leonard Moore on back shoulder fades. I think Christian Gray is great on crossing routes and slants. I think the problem is they can run both ways. You know what I mean? You can. There's a lot of. Egbuka is the best receiver they faced this year. Then Jeremiah Smith is the better receiver than Egbuka. It's a tough matchup, man. Be nice if Jordan Clark could handle Carnell Tate because if you're getting things broken up and on 3 spots, you're really it's really going to get rough. But defensively, we said what they had to be +1 against Penn State. +1 in this game is a mandatory thing, but that includes a fake punt, a blocked field goal, a 4th down where they gain 25 yards instead of 1. I count that as changed possessions too.
Yeah, or like a 4th down stop. They kind of need it.
4th down stop that Ohio State thinks they're dictating, and all of a sudden, there's KVA.
All right, I want to wrap things up how we started. You've been around this program for a long time. Went to Notre Dame, followed this team forever. What would a win on Monday mean for Notre Dame?
I mean, I can't imagine the reaction of the fan base. They've already recaptured South Bend, the local fan base. I thought that's why IU was such an important thing that the locals were able to embrace. They haven't embraced this team since Lou Holtz was here.
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah, it hasn't been.
What do you mean by that?
It hasn't been the same for Notre Dame fans. I just don't think they inherently liked Brian Kelly or Charlie Weiss.
Two super likable guys. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Willingham too. Willingham's act wore thin. Bob Davie was an incredibly likable guy. Lou was absolutely beloved by the fan base and students. I don't think it's been that way until Marcus Freeman. Notre Dame fans, much more forgiving than Notre Dame students, sure were mad at Northern Illinois, but you want to talk about putting something in the rear view. That's just part of the story this year. They lost a game. It doesn't matter who they lost to anymore. Notre Dame lost 1 game, and now they're playing for the national title. I cannot believe Notre Dame's playing for the national title. It's absolutely incredible that this is the hardest road by far. I keep writing things, and somebody on the board said, like, oh, give me a break. They play 15 games now. Exactly. They play 15 games now. They have to get through all these teams now. You could be a national champion 2 times over in the old schedule. It's an incredible achievement. And they have my friend of mine, Sean O'Reilly, graduated before me, said, because Ohio State is like the last frontier too, of like, other than playing like Miami in this situation, who else is left? Michigan. He's like, it had to end this way. We had to get Ohio State after Penn State and Georgia. SEC, mouthy Penn State, the best team in the country, probably. Right. Ohio State's the best team in the country. They're not playing 10 times, thank goodness, because that would be a problem. But this is how it had to end, and I'm really excited to see it. Best team in the country doesn't have to win it. This is not Alabama, Clemson. Unbeatable force. It's just the best team in the country against Notre Dame, who is not at full strength, even close to full strength.
Notre Dame is 8.5-point dogs. Ohio State beat Miami in the national championship, and they were 11.5-point dogs. So it is possible. Now, granted, that was back in 2002.
And that was a much better Miami team than anything we're going to look at on the field tomorrow or next Monday.
Exactly. So, hey, they don't have to be better than them all the time, but just for one night only, if Notre Dame can be better than Ohio State, it's going to be the biggest win ever. I can't wait. But he is Tim O'Malley. You can read all of his work if you subscribe to Irish Illustrated. Plus, you can listen to him on his podcast, Irish Illustrated Insider. Tim, thanks so much for taking the time. Glad we finally were able to get this done. Safe travels to Atlanta, and hopefully we could catch up again soon and talk about the biggest win ever.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Tyler. Thanks for having me on. This was more fun than a semifinal preview anyway.
All right, that's going to do it for today's episode. Thanks again for making this your first listen of the day. We are certainly not done talking about this game, not even close. Tomorrow, Mark Titus from Barstool Sports is going to make his return to the show, and I'm really excited about it. Mark is the best, but he is a Buckeye, so we're going to have to get some insight into what the other side has to say about this game. Then I'm going to be right back here on Sunday of next week with more preview content leading up to the national championship. I'm going to be doing a crossover episode with Jay Stevens, the host of Locked On Buckeyes. We actually did one last year, and it was honestly my favorite crossover episode that I've ever done. Plus, we got one last mailbag of the 2024 season, so make sure you get your questions in if you want to be featured on the show before the big game. As always, you can leave your questions in the YouTube comments or hit me up on Twitter at Locked On Irish or on Instagram at Locked On Irish Pod. Finally, make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you are listening to the podcast to make sure you never miss an episode. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you on Friday.